You're listening to the Plain Talking UK podcast, a UK-based podcast written by a passenger for anyone. And here are your hosts, Carl Stebbings and Matt Smith.
Ho, ho, ho.
Oh, really?
I know. Well, it is Christmas time.
It is Christmas time.
I know, it is Christmas. So we're back then for episode number 92 of this show. It's the Christmas period, and we're not live.
We're not.
We're not live.
No. This, I'm afraid to say, is a pre-record. So it's not a live. It's not a live one. But there's a good reason for that, because hopefully we're all eating turkey, and goodness knows what.
I know.
So what are you doing on Christmas?
So
I should say we're asking that because obviously it's actually the 12th of December when we're actually recording these segments. So
I know.
So yes.
So Christmas Day, I've got a house full. Unfortunately,
everybody coming to you.
Everyone's coming to here.
Lovely.
because we brought a bigger house early this year.
Did you? Silly you.
Everyone says we're going to come to your house for a change.
Oh, that's nice.
So all the family are here. We've got my brother-in-law and his wife,
right,
and they're 3 babies.
Oh dear,
3, and we've got my mother and father-in-law.
Right, good. Yes.
And we've also got my wife's auntie and uncle as well. They're here as well for festivities.
I presume they're just coming for, they're not all staying.
Just for the day.
Oh,
just for the day. Yeah, just for the day. So they're here to see us, and and we're obviously we're going to have an awesome time and eat far too much.
Good. Well, that sounds like Christmas.
So what are you and the lovely mummy doing?
Right. Well, myself and mother, we're basically. Well, it's just me and Mum, really. Me, Mum, Alfie and the cat. My mum. That's about
Mima.
it. I'm cooking Christmas dinner.
Are you?
I know, it's a bit scary, isn't it? And
are you doing the traditional?
No.
Totally.
We don't do traditional.
No. Cool.
Well, because it's only me and Mum, you see, the decision is that it's whatever we want to have.
Cod and chips?
Yeah, no, not quite. No, because the fish and chip shop's not open, and you can't do it at home as well. Let's be honest. So basically, what's happening is it's going to be, and I'm afraid I've nicked this from the lovely Chan from the restaurant down the road, and it's going to be basically a big, large tomato. Stuffed with sort of sausage meat with a nice sort of chili dressing. That's going to be our starter. For main, we are going to have a rather delightful beef Wellington. With roast potatoes.
Nom, nom, nom.
Indeed, but with the roast potatoes done in goose fat and oil, so the traditional elements, and Brussels sprouts, obviously, because that's the law. And then dessert will basically be a chocolate orange mousse. Indeed. And then, obviously, cheese and biscuits and coffee and gins and tonics. We're having a gin and tonic party over Christmas, me and Mum, we've decided.
I'm not a gin man.
Oh, I am a gin man. Yeah, no, I like my gin. But, that's what we're doing. And just basically slobbing out and watching all the TV programmes. Of course, very exciting for me, the very last episode of Downton Abbey is on.
Snorton Abbey.
Indeed, stop it.
Sorry for any Downton Abbey listeners.
Indeed, absolutely. Yes, you should be ashamed of yourself. But anyway, enough of this waffle. It's time.
Yeah. We have got the first part of the massive interview I took at the Malta Aviation Museum. And
so what's the background to this? Whereabouts in Malta is it?
So the Malta Aviation Museum is based on the what was the Takali airfield. In Malta, which is kind of central on the island,
right?
And it's a lovely place. There's lots of old Nissan huts, the old-fashioned tin Nissan huts from when during the Second World War. Yeah. And there's also a couple of rather new, large, big hangars on the site with loads of aircraft in it. I mean, bear in mind, Malta is a very, very small island, a very small island indeed. And in Europe, and it's becoming a very popular destination for people around Europe now, and in the US as well.
Well, me and Mum had a holiday there not that long ago, and we both fell in love with the island. It's a really lovely place. But so what's the background to the museum then? How long has it been open?
So the museum, you're going to have to listen to the interview for that, because you'll get the information there. But no, there's a huge amount of aircraft there, and a lot of the aircraft that are there are they're kind of in the process of being restored. So when you walk around the museum, you get to see a lot of aircraft that are kind of in the phase of being stripped down and restored.
Oh, but how fascinating!
There are a lot of there's just a lot of aircraft there. Wide range of aircraft. There's even some commercial, like passenger aircraft there, but just the nose sections of the museum or the aircraft itself. But it costs very little to get in.
Wow.
It's it's kind of one of those places where you need at least a good half day to go around.
Okay.
You know, it's not a massive museum, but there's a hell of a lot to see there.
Good.
You know, in the actual place itself. It's somewhere where you need to go.
So if you are going anywhere near the island of Malta, then it does sound like that this is a must see. It's time then to bring you the first part of the Malta Aviation Museum. Here we go.
Okay, so I've been very lucky then to come to the Malta Aviation Museum at Ticali on the island of Malta. And I'm here with Ray Polidano. Hello, Ray.
Hi, good morning.
And welcome on to the Plane Talking UK podcast, Ray. It's been very nice to come and see you here today.
Thanks, Carlos. Thanks. It's been nice to welcome you in the museum and be able to show you around.
So, Ray, a bit of history then about the museum. How did things start at the museum? When did it all start here?
Well, way back in '93, we started restoring the Spitfire we're basically watching at the moment. It was started in my garage at home, and then it grew bigger and bigger, so we had to move to bigger premises. And then finally, we got given a bit of Romney huts here on Ta'ali, on the sort of promise that once we finish the Spitfire, we'll give it back. But when we did finish the Spitfire in 1995, it was 50th anniversary of the Victory Day in Europe. We took the Spitfire to Valletta and showed it to the politicians, sort of. So they were impressed, and they let us have the rest of the Romney hut. And then from one Romney hut, we went to the next one, and then we were given the land, which we are occupying at the moment. And in 2005, we built this hangar, the Air Battle of Malta Memorial Hangar. And then in 2013, we built the main exhibition hangar, which houses the 50s jets and other stuff.
Excellent. So we're standing then in this hangar at the moment, in the memorial hangar, then next to the Mary Rose, the Spitfire here. Is this a flying? Does this run this particular?
No. This was a sort of transition learning curve from. I was actually building radio-controlled balsa wood models, and then suddenly found myself building a full-size Spitfire. It was thanks to the help of Mike Eastman from Manchester in the UK. He offered to come to Malta and spend a couple of months with us, and he sort of started the rebuilding process. That's how it started.
Wow, I tell you, looking at the model now, it's fantastic. I mean, it looks like it's ready to fly now. Like it could taxi and...
It looks like. In actual fact, the interesting thing about it is not just a Spitfire. It's a Spitfire that's got a lot of pedigree in it. It first started flying in January of '43 for Operation Torch, and it was flown by Ronald Berry, who was the wing commander of 322 Wing. And then once Operation Torch was over, it came over here on Malta to Ta'ali for the invasion of Sicily. And it actually shot down the Messerschmitt and damaged another one during the initial days of the invasion of Sicily. And then once Sicily was taken, it was based on Sicily, and then went over to southern Italy and kept on flying right to the end of the war in May of '45 in Italy. And then it only returned after the war ended, joined 73 Squadron, was eventually damaged in a gale, but not damaged enough to sort of be a total write-off, but it was good enough to be given to the scouts, to the local air scouts. So that's basically why it exists nowadays.
Wow, I must say, is there any more work you're doing to this, and is it a finished project?
No, it's a finished project. Obviously, it would need some attention once in a while. The moment we're going to do the new upholstery for the seat, in fact. But it's basically finished.
Oh wow, it looks fantastic. So we've moved round then to the next exhibit here. For those of you listening as the audio podcast, the pictures will be with the show notes for this show. So what's this aircraft here, Ray?
Well, this is a Tiger Moth. It's the museum's first airworthy aircraft. We didn't actually have Tiger Moths during the Air Battle of Malta, but we needed to create an excuse for having a flying aircraft in which we could give members and friends and flying experience in an open cockpit biplane. Obviously, our excuse is that most pilots that flew Spitfires and Hurricanes in the defense of Malta actually had their first flights and went solo in this type, in the Tiger Moth. The only other episode that we had using Tiger Moths on Malta was in the 1930s. We had Royal Navy Queen Bees. They were the radio-controlled ones. They used to be flown off Marsa Schlock for the fleet to shoot at. So that was the first instances of having Tiger moths on Malta. We later on had Royal Navy ones operating from Hull Far. In fact, there was a particular one registered K-28. It was actually the aircraft that Roald Dahl went solo in when he was in Africa. And they used to perform during air shows. There's a picture on the Times of Malta of it throwing flour bags on a car full of bandits in one of these air shows.
Oh, it's great. I mean, so this is a flying model then. This one will actually this fly.
We don't fly that often. It's a bit complicated. I mean, here, although the museum is based on an airfield, which was RAF Ali, it's now become a sort of park, a national park. But there's still 460 meters left of the runway, which we can use after obtaining permission from different sources to actually position the aircraft to Lu'a, the main airfield. So we are allowed to take off from here, operate from Lu'a, and then eventually bring it back using the reverse of when we flew it out. At least it keeps us mobile without having to. We can fly it from Lu'a without actually having to dismantle it and go through the process of reassembling it and this sort of thing.
I have to say the plane is so immaculately clean, right? It looks so well looked after.
Well, it's been a labour of love. It's been done locally by David Polidano. But then the wings got sent to the UK, to Vintage Fabrics. They had the wings fabric covered in the UK, and then they were returned, while the fuselage was done by Andrew Denny, who actually came over from the UK to do the fabric covering, helped by David himself. So since it doesn't fly that often, it's in pristine condition.
Have you flown in this aircraft yourself?
Yes, a couple of times. It's fun.
Oh wow! That must be an amazing experience, an open cockpit aircraft like this.
Yes, last time I flown was a couple of months ago. We were flying over Grand Harbour, which is a tremendous experience. Wow. And especially like you said, flying in an open cockpit. The only thing was, I always dreamt of flying in a Tiger moth. Obviously, my dream meant going to fly in the UK. So I actually bought myself a leather jacket and this sort of thing, because I was told it was going to be very cold flying in a Tiger moth. But when I actually flew in it the first time, I didn't have time to get this flying jacket or anything, so I simply flew in my T-shirt. It was, well, not cold, being Malta.
No, you have such great weather here in Malta. Obviously, it must be so nice to fly, especially this aircraft in Malta with the sun and and the great visibility you must have.
There's still some when I used to fly on microlights also, on the weight shift ones, and going over to Gozo, for example, and changing heights. It'd be like when you're diving. You find a sort of layer of very cold air, and then you climb a couple of 100 feet above, and you come in hot air again, and this sort of thing. So even though it's on Malta, sometimes you come across this cold air, and you'll end up landing with a permanent grin on your face because you're frozen.
So can I ask you, have you got a pilot's license yourself?
No, I only fly as a passenger. The only time I went solo was paragliding.
Okay. Would you like to get your pilot's license? Would that be something you'd like to have?
Most probably I'm past it now. I'm 62.
Oh, you're not too old. They say they're never too old to learn to fly.
No. I mean, I know pilots that are still flying at even 96 years of age.
Wow.
Obviously with safety pilots, but I don't know. At the moment, I'm quite happy to just fly along as a passenger. I try to fly in most classic aircraft, so. Whenever I go to the UK, I've flown in the Dragon Rapide a couple of times, this sort of thing. I've flown at DC-3s, DC-4s, DC-6s.
Wow.
And I keep a sort of log of these
what you've been
flying on.
Oh, that's brilliant. So move on to the next exhibition here, or exhibit at this. This is fantastic. I don't think you can really grasp the size of these aircraft when you see these flying. When you see them on the ground, I think they seem a lot bigger in up close.
Yes, that's the case. And in fact, I came across this experience when I was modelling. Used to have this model of something or other occupying half the dining room table, and then you go and fly it, and it's a dot in the sky like a fly. But yes, when they're inside the hangar, they look bigger. Although we're looking at the Hurricane at the moment, so it is bigger. It's bigger than the Spitfire. It's bulkier. This particular one was actually recovered from the seabed 20 years ago, just last September, where it was on the seabed for 57 years.
Oh, what kind of condition, when you pull these up from the sea, what kind of condition are these aircraft in when they've been down that long in the sea?
They could be different. I mean, we've seen videos of aircraft on the seabed here on Malta, which are complete and quite in very good condition. But this one, since the structure was actually wood, fabric, and just pipes, only the pipework survived. But that was enough to give you a basic kit of parts. So you have all the brackets and the carriage legs, engine mounts, engine and stuff. They were all there. All you need is to clean them up and then spray them up and this sort of thing, and start building on this basic kit of parts. Well, as you can see, the Hurricane, the back side of it, that's all wooden fabric. So obviously that's all disappeared with the ditching. And you can see the photo here of what we actually recovered. The tail section we recovered a bit 2 months before. But this is the engine, cowls, cockpit seat, and all the pipeworks and stuff. But essentially it was all there. So
could you find out which particular aircraft this was?
This was Z3055.
Okay.
It actually came to Malta in June of 41, flown off the Ark Royal and flown by a pilot called Thomas Haxton. It was part of 46 Squadron. Then it ditched on the 4th of July of the same year of 1941, where it stayed on the seabed for 57 years before it was recovered. Yeah, we were able to find its identification plate inside the cockpit, so that would give you the identity. And then from records that we have, we could trace basically its history. Also, it's a very short history, unlike the Spitfire.
Oh wow! So the engine itself, I mean, was the engine? I mean, obviously the engine is kind of past it when it's been on the seabed that long. But did you still recover the engine as well?
Oh yes, it was part of the recovery. We have an engine now that actually works on the aircraft that we're restoring.
Oh, wow.
This is basically being restored to taxiing condition, so it'll be functionable in all aspects except for flying. I mean, that was our decision because we had to retain as much as possible of the original. The aircraft could only taxi, but at least you could hear the sound of the Merlin engine, which is another Merlin engine, not the one recovered from the sea. I think we've used the reduction gear from the one recovered from the sea. Otherwise, it's an engine that we recovered from a scrapyard. Actually 2 engines, and out of 2 engines we made one in working condition.
I've got to say, it's coming on, the actual restoration process has come along so well. And we can see you're working on the wing here with the rivets and bits and pieces, which are obviously
the clecos. Yeah, we just need to finish the leading edge and part of the trailing edge, construct the pair of ailerons, and we're basically there.
Wow,
the radiator's already in place and all the cooling system is in place.
It must be an absolute, passion that you guys must have to put these aircraft back together from how this aircraft was from the seabed.
Yeah, it's always an effort to actually have aircraft that took part in the Second World War exhibited for future generations to know what we had during wartime. So. Yeah, it's a labour of love, but it's fun doing it, finally.
How many guys you got working here then, Ray, helping you put these aircraft back together?
Not enough.
You need more.
Yeah, well, mostly all the volunteers are led by David. He's the aircraft restorer, actually employed by the museum. But whenever we need something special, like if we need some work done on the lathe, and we got a volunteer who's an expert on this sort of stuff, so he comes along to give us a hand. Like spraying and stuff, we usually get Clive Denny over from the UK on a busman's holiday. He'll spend some time spraying and the sort of thing, and then once he's done, he'll go to the seaside.
Oh, that sounds great. Sounds like the kind of holiday I'd like.
Yeah.
To come from the UK and give it and help here. I think I'll give up my job in the UK and come and help you. So moving around then, looking around here, you've got obviously not just the aviation static displays here. You've got some road displays from the airfields and stuff. This standing here in front of us here.
This is a QL tanker, which in the UK were used for, even during the Battle of Britain to refuel Spitfires and Hurricanes. On Malta, we didn't have that luxury. If we did have any tankers, they would have been an ideal target for the enemy, so they would have been blown up pretty quick. I've seen pictures of, we had like a sort of double-decker, and they had like a tank on the top floor, and they used to refuel by gravity. There was also like a towed Pauser thing. Again, that must have been shot up quite soon. Usually they used just the tins of fuel that used to be delivered by the convoys. And we had two types. One of them was called a flimsy, which, as the name implies, it was a tin can, even thinner than a tin of milk. And then there were the more stronger ones, but they could only be used once. They used to get punctured, the two holes in the top, pour the fuel out, and then get thrown away. On Malta and North Africa, they used them. They used to open up the tops, fill them with earth, and construct pens, like an open-air garage, to protect the aircraft from bomb blasts and stuff like that. It was only later on, when when fighting in North Africa, the Allies discovered the German invention, the jerrycan, which was eventually copied. We got an example of a jerrycan dated 1941, of the German one, and then the British one dated 1943. So that's when in the UK they started building these replica jerrycans, which are still being produced nowadays. It was an ideal. It's amazing what a sort of small invention does to the war effort. Like Churchill actually claimed that the Willys Jeep was a sort of big contributor to the winning of the Second World War, and other stuff like that.
Oh wow, that's amazing. The stories and stuff that you must have, Ray, yourself, from what you've heard over the years. I'll just say, over in the back of the hangar here, is this a work in progress aircraft? What's this, Ray?
Not really a work in progress. It's this is a swordfish.
Okay.
And although we didn't plan to actually acquire a swordfish, we were offered it by a guy from Canada, and we sort of said, yeah, okay, and we bought it and brought it over, but it still has to wait its turn for restoration. But swordfishes are very important for the history of the Second World War here on Malta. Obviously in the UK, they're mostly famous for the attack on the Bismarck and on the Channel Dash, but in the Mediterranean, the first notable operation was done by 24 swordfishes of Illustrious that attacked the Italian fleet in Taranto. So this attack damaged a number and sank a number of ships of the Italian Navy, which rendered them unserviceable. And the ones that weren't damaged, they moved to bases further up north in Italy. So it created a safer space in the Mediterranean for the British fleet and convoys to operate to Malta. Then another thing, we had A30 Squadron that were based here on Malta for 3 years, and in these 3 years they sunk about 50,000 tons of shipping per month. So there was a continuous action going on, and it was why Malta was important in the Second World War, because of the fighting in North Africa. Rommel needed all his supplies to conduct the war in North Africa, but these had to reach him from Italy. And the effort from Malta that sunk as many of these ships as possible meant that Rommel didn't have the supplies that he needed, like in the final battle of El Alamein, which was the first victory for the Allies. Before then, the Germans were pushed out of Africa. So the Swordfish was one of these aircraft. They used to do operations about 8 hours long, go down to Tunisian coast, looking for these convoys and trying to sink them. Sometimes they used to carry just the pilot and the observer, and an extra fuel tank in the middle to be able to have a longer range. Another episode regarding a swordfish from Malta was actually in 1943, before the invasion of Sicily. The Americans were bombing Sicily, Pantelleria and Lampedusa, and there was a swordfish looking for a downed German crew. Something went wrong with the compass, so they decided to land on Lampedusa. And when they landed, almost out of fuel, they were told, go back and tell them we surrendered. And this is the only episode in the Second World War when an aircraft actually invaded an island. and the pilots flying it, a guy called Cohen, became known as the King of Lampedusa.
Oh, wow. That's a fantastic story, Ray. No, it's amazing to see. I mean, even in this condition it's in now, it's still, great to see the swordfish here. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done with this aircraft. Is it easy to source when you're trying to find parts and pieces for the aircraft? Is it easy to find these bits?
Not really. I mean, even the Royal Navy are finding it hard, like say engine-wise, to find spare parts for engines. The Pegasus, they're obviously getting rarer and rarer. Some of the pieces, because we didn't actually start assessing what we have to start restoration, but we think that we have parts of the elevators and stabilizers missing, because this aircraft spent a lot of time out in the open in Canada. So each season it used to have its fair amount of snow falling on it, and obviously being made out of pipes, the water would seep inside the pipes and rust them off. And as you can see, the back end has actually fallen off because of the rust. But on the other hand, like this pipework, you could basically replace and start. We have to, first of all, disassemble the fuselage to start off with, and then start reassembling it bit by bit until we have the fuselage on its undercarriage. Then we have to sort out and tackle the problem of the wings, engine and other parts. But at least you'll have the fuselage on its undercarriage much better than it's at the moment.
It looks great, Ryan. I hope that you have the help and everything you need to put this aircraft sort of back together into display condition, which I'm sure you will.
Well, the only thing keeping us back at the moment is that originally our main object was to get the Gladiator from the War Museum and have it restored back to the way it was, say, the same standard as the Hurricane. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So at the moment we're looking for another one which is on the seabed. That it's been sort of eluding us for a number of years. We haven't found it yet. But if we do find it, then we hope to be given permission to retrieve it and start its restoration. We actually got wings over there that we acquired from the RAF reserve collection, the RAF Museum's reserve collection, and some of the pieces from Finland. So we've actually have the whole wing assembly, obviously in need of restoration, but it's amazing how complicated they used to make these aircraft. The ribs themselves, the sort of aluminium sections, if you try getting somebody to do them nowadays, they send you packing.
Lots of patience you need.
Yes.
So we'll move on then to the next hangar then?
Find this and other great shows at the Aviation Media Network.
TheVoicesInYourHead.com. The Plain Talking UK podcast is a voluntary project that aims to keep you informed with the latest aviation-related stories from newswires across the globe.
Producing our content does cost money though. If you enjoy our show, why not help us keep on the air by making a donation towards the server and website hosting fees through PayPal. Any contributions would be greatly appreciated.
Are you an Amazon user? If so, why not do your shopping through the link on our website? There's no cost to yourself and Amazon pay us a small referral fee on qualifying purchases.
To find out more about the show and to meet the team, take yourself to our website www.plaintalkinguk.com,
or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/plaintalkinguk, on Twitter via @plaintalkinguk, or get in touch via email on podcast@plaintalkinguk.com. Thanks for listening.
Hello, this is Jenny in Rome with the background music of Andrea Bocelli singing one of Italy's favourite Christmas carols. And I'd like to wish Carlos and Matt and all the contributors to the Plain Talking UK podcast a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and of course a great 2016. Bye.
Hello, Carlos and Matt and all the Plain Talking UK listeners. It's Matt Fabricius here. Just wanted to say Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all the listeners. Thanks so much for the podcast of the last year, and hope it carries on and keeps growing into the new year. It's fantastic, so thanks guys for the time you put into that. Carlos, I'm expecting you to get your PPL next year, so come on, knuckle down, get some hard work done, and we'll go flying together. I look forward to meeting you guys as soon as the weather gets nice when I fly down there, and that's it. Toodaloo.
G'day Carlos, Matt and the Plain Talking UK podcast community out there. It's Ray Davis from Down Under. Just wishing everyone a very Merry Christmas and a happy and safe New Year. And looking forward to 2016 for a bigger and brighter year. Also looking forward to more podcasts from the dynamic duo that is Carlos and Matt, as well as talking to the rest of the community out there in the live chat room. So until then, stay safe, be happy, and catch you on the flip side.
Standing next to another iconic aircraft. What's this one, Ray?
This is the Vampire. It's a T-11, a two-seat version. This was the first type of jet that we had on Malta. In fact, we Maltese used to know it as the whistle because of the different engine sound. So they used to whistle along instead of the usual reciprocating engine noise with the propeller. This is an aircraft that goes back to the time when de Havilland used to build a Mosquito. So it's got a wooden fuselage. The rest of it is aluminium. I suppose de Havilland could not retrain their carpenters in such a hurry, so they returned what was what was proven design, and they kept doing at least the fuselage pod. The strange shape of this aircraft, having the twin boom, is because the jet engines at that time, like the Derwent and in this case, the jets actually produced by de Havilland themselves, not by Rolls-Royce, weren't so powerful, so they needed the intake and the outlet to be as short as possible. So this designer from de Havilland came out with the solution of having twin boom instead.
That's something I didn't know, Ray.
Yeah, it's, the Seahawk that we're going to visit, the designer, that Sydney came out with a different solution. You can still see the short intake and outlet, but in his case, he did two outlets instead of just one. So again, it kept it as short as possible.
So on the back here, Ray, you've got Royal Navy markings on this on the Vampire. How did you come across this aircraft?
Well, this came from Booker, from the UK. It was donated by the airshow organisers at that roundabout. Let me see, this should be in 2001. But it's actually, although this is a T-11, it's representing a T-22 used by the Royal Navy here on Halfar, and the airfield on the south side of the island. In fact, it's got HF on its tail. And we painted it to represent the Royal Navy colours used then up to 1983. This was a gunnery trainer, basically. It used to have 4 20 millimeters, and they used it to learn the art of air-to-air firing.
And this aircraft even had the ejection seat, right?
Yes, in this case. Most of them were converted. They used to have the old Mosquito canopy. Then they got them converted in Cambridge at I've quite forgotten the name of the company there, but it's the same company that's helped a lot with the Vulcan to the air in the UK. It'll come eventually.
Just while we're walking to the next aircraft, right? Obviously, you've heard in the UK that the Vulcan is on its last tour of the UK. What are your feelings on the Vulcan being took away or brought away from the flying?
Well, it's certainly going to be missed because it was quite a crowd puller. Unfortunately, the complexities of the aircraft have proven, I suppose, very expensive. And even more unfortunate is that the RAF can't really afford to keep it on their joining the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, for example. But it's far too expensive and complex.
It's a shame, yeah. I was lucky to see that this year, right? The last one of the last shows it done at RIAT at the Royal International Air Tattoo. Have you seen the Vulcan flying, right?
No, I haven't. Last air show I've been to was Legends at Duxford when it didn't take part then. There's still quite a number of aircraft I've missed, either due to non-appearance and being out of service at the moment, like the Swordfish, for example. I've been I don't know how many times to different air shows and always miss the Swordfish.
Do you know, Ray, there is talk in the UK at the moment that there's a group of people who are going to hopefully get one of the last airworthy Concords flying again. Have you heard that?
Wow, that would be something.
Yeah, apparently it's one of the news stories we've covered on our show, and apparently a group of people have got enough money, well, nearly enough money to get one of the last Concords flight and airworthy again.
Well, I suppose the main problem is the reason why Concorde was retired was that it didn't receive any support from the parent company. As you know, all the aircraft that fly have got to be supported by their respective company. Like even the Tiger Moth, and there's the Moth Club, which actually takes care of all the modifications. If say there's a defect found in the Tiger Moth, then the Moth Club would in turn advise all the other moth owners, listen, you've got to change this or modify that, and to keep them flying. Now, if that doesn't happen on an aircraft, then you'll be flying an aircraft which could be potentially a bit dangerous because a defect was found in some other country and you don't get to know of it. So with the Concorde, that was, I think, Air France or on the French side, they didn't want to keep on guaranteeing this sort of support. I think even on the Vulcan, the same thing happened.
So on to one of the next exhibits here then, Ray. What's this aircraft here?
Well, this is the Seahawk. It was one of the first Royal Navy carrier-borne fighters. They had the Attacker before that, but it wasn't such a success. But the Seahawk was again the brainchild of Sidney Cam, same designer as the Hurricane. In fact, you can see the outline of the fin and rudder is basically the same as the Hurricane. It was like a sort of signature of the designer. In this case, this exhibit here is representing the Suez Crisis, which up to the war in Libya, when they got rid of Gaddafi, was the last time Malta was involved in a war in '57. And in fact, it's represented by those yellow and black stripes that were used for the Suez Crisis. They copied the Normandy black and white stripes. And this used to belong to 804 Squadron.
All right.
Which we have pictures of actually based here on Ta'ali, which was also at one time named HMS Goldfinch. That was used by the Royal Navy.
So one of the most striking features of this aircraft, Ray, obviously the listeners will be able to see, is the folding wings, which obviously was for help on being on board ship.
Yeah, that's normal for most Royal Navy aircraft. I say most because like the one we just came across, the Vampire didn't have any folding wings. It was only introduced later on the Sea Venom, for example. They started having folding wings. But obviously the folding wings were much needed gadget, sort of, to be able to pack more aircraft on the flight deck and also to be able to get them down into the hangar deck.
So this aircraft, how did the museum come across this one? Was this donated
This was
again?
donated by Midland Bank before they became HSBC. It was the transitional stage when we had a branch of Midland Bank based on Slema, and our secretary managed to convince them to sort of donate money for the purchase of this aircraft. This was originally in Wales, at a museum that closed down in Wales, and we bought it from the eventual buyers of the aircraft. And it was quite easy to get to Malta, just take the wings off, put it on a trailer. So
that's fantastic, right? And the engines in this one, they've been removed?
No, it's still got the engine.
Still got the engines?
It's not in working condition. Even the Vampire's got the engine on. But again, although the engine on the Vampire will actually turn sometimes using a battery.
Wow. So, because these aircraft do look, Ray, they do look as if they are ready to fly. You know, the work you've done here to obviously preserve these aircraft is fantastic.
This is the type of restoration that I've mentioned before, the static. So on the outside, they look they depart as the aircraft that when being used at that time, but inside there's nothing that works, and this sort of thing.
Okay, moving round this. Let's have a look here. So some of the other exhibits here, this sort of displays you've got on here. One of ejection seats here.
This is one of the early ones. This was used on a Valiant tanker. It was scrapped at Hull way back in the 80s, and we have eventually acquired it. But ejector seats kept being improved every day with each type of aircraft they're used on. So this was rather a basic one. It had to be sort of, you had to have a certain amount of speed and height to be able to use it safely. Then when they introduced the Harrier, for example, since most of the incidents that happened was when the aircraft was hovering a few feet off the ground, then the ejector seats had to be improved enough to be able to throw the pilot out of an aircraft which is stationary and almost on the ground. That's the way they Martin Baker always improved their product.
And another donated part to the museum?
Yeah, we acquired it sort of. Yeah. Most museums in the UK. There's first one I've seen. There's one at Shuttleworth. They've got one also at Duxford. Before they relocated all the stuff in the big hangar, it used to be underneath the stairs before you go up on those balcony.
So this is a trainer. Then we're standing next to here, one of the first kind of trainers that pilots use, right?
Yes, this is the Link trainer. It was designed by a guy called Edward Link. He simply wanted to learn how to fly and couldn't afford it. So, borrowing stuff from his father's factory, he built a toy that he could play around simulating flight. In fact, his father used to build organs for churches. So the principle it works on, you've got 4 bellows underneath where that black thing is, and these bellows would inflate or deflate according to the amount of air that's pumped into them, and it would move the aircraft as it's, it could bank right or left or pitch up and down, this sort of thing. It could do anything except loop. The purpose, though, on these Link trainers was different from the simulators we know nowadays. This was obviously no computers and stuff, and it was at the time in the 1930s when new things were being introduced in flying. Before, the pilots used to fly by the seat of their pants, VFR and this sort of thing. This gadget was intended to teach them to trust their instruments. In fact, they used to be shut in the dark with that canopy, so you can see it's painted black on the inside. All they could see was the instruments, which is basically the same instruments as on the aircraft that they would eventually fly on or would have already be flying on, and they would have to do like a circuit of the airfield. At the same time, they would be sort of flying this Link trainer. The instructor sitting on that desk over there would see that triangular thing, which called the crab, and that would be moving and drawing with a red ink the movements of the trainer. So if he was supposed to be doing a rectangular circuit of the airfield, that thing would be drawing a rectangular shape. if it got lost or is not controlling properly, it would be going all over the place. Another thing this thing was meant to teach the pilots was the introduction of the new things that were being introduced in the 1930s, retractable undercarriage and flaps. So this used to have light bulbs like that one over there, and I used to have a couple of light bulbs on the canopy, which would indicate to the instructor whether the student remembered to lower his undercarriage or lower his flaps and this sort of thing. So those were the things that this thing actually taught the student. The instructor also had those two handles over there. He could also increase or decrease the amount of side wind, so he could give him a crosswind and upset a bit of the control. So the pilot would also learn how to control coming in for a landing in a crosswind and this sort of thing. So it was...
So as basic as it looks, it is quite... there's quite a lot of parts to it.
Yes. Well, it's not exactly like the new simulators that's fully computerized and you could simulate any sort of engine now and stuff like that. But still, it was the start of the concept that we know nowadays, and built by the same guy that nowadays Link has got these modern flight simulators. Wow. And this used to be found in most bases in the UK, and we had one here on Ta'ali in a similar building, which has got that sort of typical Maltese stone thing. It's down the road from here near Torre Cumbo. So the building is actually still survives, except for the inside. The inside now is presented here in the museum.
Wow, that's brilliant. So did you you got donated this this particular exhibit?
Yes, it was donated by a German couple, Juncker. This was previously in a museum in Cologne, which closed down, and they said if you'd like to have it, you can just send for it, and that's what we done.
Wow, that's brilliant. With everything else that comes with it, 'cause there's a lot, we can see a lot of bits and pieces that come with the whole simulator itself.
Yeah, it's in working condition, so once in a while we start it up and try our luck at that sort of controlling.
So you've had a go in there yourself, right?
Yes.
And is it easy?
No. I mean, you have to, if you're used like myself with VFR flying, going totally blind and trying to regulate the flying speed and then trust the artificial horizon to make a turn without actually diving into the ground, it's not easy.
Wow.
In fact, this was called the sweat box by the students.
I would say, actually, because there's not a lot of ventilation really in there.
There's only a fan underneath, and also obviously the fellow students would be watching this thing going up and down and blobbing around, and obviously laughing their heads off.
We'll get to pictures of that and put it on the site so listeners can see all about this, because it is a very good bit of kit there, Ray, I think, and it obviously worked very well for training pilots in learning how to fly.
Well, if you have a look at logbooks that Second World War pilots used to have, at the back of the logbook there is the amount of hours that they had to do on the link trainer. So ever so often they would have to go and do a couple of hours on the link trainer to sort of teach them or get them current on some stuff.
Wow. Bit different to what we have to learn in now, I think. So in the other part of the hangar here, Ray, we've got a couple of helicopters here. Are these in progress?
Well, these aren't actually ours. We're keeping them for a guy. He's completely rotary wing mad, and he bought these two Suez helicopters, ex-British Army. He's hoping to be able to assemble one of them complete. He's actually purchased 2.5 of these, so choosing the right one and putting it together would eventually give him a full helicopter. But this is the area of our sort of dirty area where we do most of the engineering work. Although sometimes we are compelled, like on the Texan, for example, we can't actually get the Texan in here, so we work on it on site in the other hangar. But whenever we need to, like we started the Hurricane project in this section here, when it was still just bare pipes, and then we still have to fabric cover it, so most of the work is done, as well as spray painting. So we just lower the shutter and this would make the area sealed against the usual smell, spraying smells and stuff.
So I see you've got a wing there in progress, Ray, on the bench there.
That's a microlight wing. That's one project. We've got several other wings being constructed in the proper carpentry shop. Then we're polishing up those propellers from an 1830. We're even doing up a telephone box.
A British telephone box in the corner of the workshop.
King George V telephone box. It's quite old. And once ready, it's going to be placed next to the cafeteria, so it'll give a nice background sort of the telephone.
Very good, very good.
It needs restoration as everything else, and sometimes it's not as easy as we think. It's been done the wrong way around. There's several methods you could do. I mean, normally you go through the door, and then in front of you find the telephone. And this one, the telephone would be attached to the right-hand side. So we have to dismantle it and reassemble it as we want it with the telephone in front. Now the screws that hold the thing together, although but in theory they're supposed to go out and then change and whatever, are a bit refusing to sort of unscrew themselves.
But I'm sure it'll look good when it's finished, Ray.
Yes.
It'll make a nice accompaniment to the museum. Perhaps you should put some wings on it.
You need very big wings because it's very heavy. It's cast iron.
So another part of the museum you've got, Ray, apart from the static aircraft and stuff, you've got like a headquarters building here, 203 Squadron building. In here you've got some models.
Yes, this is the model room area. Part of the foundation, we've got a group called the Society of Scan Modelers. They do fantastic models, take part in competitions, especially in the UK, and cart off a number of prizes. In it, although we don't have just Maltese-related models, obviously they would do models that most probably would mean them winning prizes. But there is, like the first one we can see is very important because it's representing Calafrana, the first seaplane base that we had on Malta. All the flying on Malta from 1915 onwards till the building in the 20s of Halfar was done from the sea. So we had flying boats, float planes or amphibians. And this was the base Calafrana where these aircraft used to operate from.
That's a great mod, ever so detailed as well, Ray. This must have took someone a long while to put together this model.
Yeah, this has been inspired by a photo of Calafrana in the same period. As you can see, they've got the Marines, so you've got soldiers, Marines. It was a base that was used by both Royal Navy, Royal Air Force, and Marines. So this diorama shows the intermix of the three services here on Malta.
And you've also, above that, Ra, just noticed you've got one of the Hawker Siddeley Vulcans.
Yes, this is a cross-section of the letter type. We start off with the Shackleton. And then the Canberras and the Hunters and the Buccaneers and the Seahawk. So that's the more, not recent. The aircraft that we used to see up to 1979 when the British forces left the island. The top shelf shows the Italian aircraft that we used to see in the skies above us during the Second World War. So there's a good cross-section of the SM-79s, the Fiat CR-42, the Macchi 200 and the 202. So it's a good cross-section built by Richard Caruana.
So the paint, not just the building, but the paintwork as well on these models is really good.
It's not just that. It's also, if you have a look at the Gladiator over here, 5.9, that's totally scratch built. So that's not done from a kit. The guy that done it started from scratch and uses all sorts of stuff that he finds and to build the actual model. So it's just more than actually assembling it and spray painting it. The others are, most of them are sort of heavily modified, like you have the bow fighter from 272 Squadron, you've got the engine exposed, and usually they had some others that are not displayed over here but are really comprehensive. They take off all the cowls and they do a diorama as if it's being worked on and this sort of thing. But this is a bow fighter from 272, used for anti-shipping. And the other one is the Mosquito from 23 Squadron. That was the first Mosquitoes to operate outside the UK. They came prior to the invasion of Sicily. And the other one, the B-24, that was an American operated one from Libya. But as you can see, it's got British fin flashes, because they wanted to sort of make sure they don't get shot by mistake. There's some interesting colour schemes come from that period. We had Spitfires, because the Americans were operating Spitfires as soon as they entered the war in North Africa. Some having the American star on one side and the British roundel on the other side. Fin flashes, and some of them even carried a huge American flag painted on the side of the fuselage to make sure they're properly identified.
No, these are fantastic models, I have to say.
This is the area related to the air sea rescue thing that we had on the island during the Second World War. These are two launches that were used for air sea rescue, and the list behind them is the list of all the aircrew that were picked up by these air rescue launches. Starting off from the very first one, which was when the Gladiator 5519 was shot down in 1940, and the pilot Peter Hartley was rescued, and right down to when we started having like Liberators ditching in the sea near Malta, when they were attacking targets in Europe. So some of them operated from Libya, even taking part in the Polesti raid.
There's quite a lot of different aircraft there, right, which were shot down and recovered by these boats. I mean, you can see like the Spitfires, Wellingtons, Swordfish, and the Beaufighter, and there's even some BF 109s.
Yeah, 109s, and going right down, that was 1943 would be the bit where the invasion of Sicily was taking place. So 1943 was quite busy, because there was a lot of toing and froing to Sicily, a lot of aircraft being damaged and tried to make it back to Malta, and they wouldn't, so they would ditch nearer to the island and try to be picked up by the air sea rescue launches. As you can see, there's very few German, two Henkel 111s in June of 43, just one 109, and the rest we started having like Warhawks. We had number 3 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force, and 450 operating from Malta for just a couple of days before they actually went over to Sicily. The others are 1942, they're all related to the air battle of Malta. So the last blitz was October 1942, as you can see. It's a mix of Spitfires mostly, 109s, Ju-88s, Mach 202, a lot of Ju-88s.
A lot of aircraft that probably ended up at the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, they're all ended up in the sea. Those were the guys that were blubbing around in the Mediterranean hoping for a rescue, and they were very happy to see the high-speed.
It just goes to show, though, Ray, that the amount of aircraft that are probably still in the sea now, around the islands of Malta here, which are still yet to be found.
Exactly, yeah, but most of these would be in very deep waters, and you could. Well, the ones that are actually nearer to the island, most of them have been found already, and like the 109 so far, we've never been able to find a reasonable shaped one. Usually they're the ones that the pilots just parachuted down from them and just terminal dive into the sea and obviously breaking up in pieces. It's most likely the Spitfires and Hurricanes would try to ditch nearer to the island, be safe. The others, the Germans and the Italians, would try to make it back to Sicily. So most
be over deep water.
Deep water, and obviously nearer to Sicily than to Malta, if they didn't make it back to Sicily.
Wow. A lot of history in Malta. Right, there's definitely a lot of history around on this island.
Well, it was a battle, the Air Battle of Malta. Obviously started in June of 1940, and you could say it ended on the 8th of September 43 with the capitulation of Italy. And then, as you can see, we had a little bit of movement in 44, but that was most probably aircraft. Like that's a very that's an 88 actually in late 43. Then there's two rescues in 44, but they were Spitfires, most probably coming back either for maintenance on Malta and then their engine clunking out or something. So there wasn't any fighting. We were basically out of the war in September of 43.
Great. So, well, we bring the walk round tour of the museum to a close, Ray. It's been fantastic to speak to you today, Ray. Your history and what you know is just amazing, and I'm going to listen to this back myself, and I'm sure the listeners will enjoy the show. What's a bit of background about yourself, though, Ray? How's your sort of passion for aviation start?
I suppose it's my father's fault. He was in the RAF, joined in 1939, and worked at Luton during the war. He was a civilian fitter, mostly on Blamins and Wellingtons. And then post-war he was based on SAPI, the maintenance unit, and he used to take me to work with him when I was big enough, like say from 6 years onwards. He used to let me loose in the hangar with the instructions not to touch anything and I'll be okay. So obviously I got the aircraft bug that early in my life. Then during one of the rundowns in 69 he joined Miyako, which was an American company doing DC-3s, and I used to go and visit as often as I can, and also started flying with them, sometimes on air tests and stuff. So again, the bug really grew. I worked with Miyako for a couple of years on engines, but then they had some industrial trouble, and I was the last one to join, so the first one to leave, and eventually joined the bank, which was ideal because I only worked till 1 o'clock. So from say 1:30, 1:45 onwards, after I'd eaten and maybe had a short rest, I was able to do first radio control, modeling, and then eventually got involved in this museum right from the very start in 1993.
Wow. And the museum is purely funded by donations from the public?
Yes, apart from the entrance money, that usually helps pay the usual bills. But when we're doing a project like, say, the Tiger Moth for flying, we relied on people donating. Some people would donate a certain amount of money to buy the bracing wires, for example. Another one would pay for the fabric covering, and that's that sort of thing. Even like this swordfish was again a big donation by two guys. And although it was really expensive at that time, it was 13,000 Maltese, just to buy the state it is now. We managed to pay for it complete, so in no time at all.
Wow! What's the future hold for the museum, Ray? What big plans have you got? Any big plans for the museum?
Well, one thing is to set foot on a small hangar at Lua, so that we can. Whenever we like to fly an aircraft, we can actually fly it from the runway, like I said before, but be able to base it in a hangar at Lua, so we wouldn't have the headache of leaving an aircraft outside, or else having to pay for a lot for hangarage. And obviously having this, like the Tiger Moth or the later on the Piper Cub, flying regularly, so we could instill some of this vintage flying in the locals,
and hopefully have some at the air shows. Would be nice, Ray.
Yes. Like last year, although we didn't take part in the air show, we took part in the Indina Grand Prix with the Tiger Moth. It done 2 displays over the weekend.
That'd be good. Excellent, Ray. So, well, thank you ever so much for your tour around the museum today. Just for the listeners of the show, how can they find out more information about the Aviation Museum here in Malta?
Well, just visit our website, www.maltaaviationmuseum.com, and there's the usual information on it.
So that was the first instalment then from the Malta Aviation Museum, interviews that I took with Ray Polidano. And that was a fantastic first segment I had there around the hangars. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Like I said, for those of you who want to find out more, if you go to www.maltaaviationmuseum.com, you'll see they've got a brilliant website with loads of information and photos of what you can see in there. And one of the aircraft I've actually got in the museum is a DC-3, a Dakota, actually full size, proper actual aircraft. It's fantastic. It really is. So yeah, go on there and have a look. And for those of you who are going over to Malta next year, go and visit the museum for definitely.
Well, you can get in touch with the show in the usual ways. It is podcast@planetalkinguk.com is the email address. Website is www.planetalkinguk.com, and it is facebook.com/planetalkinguk. Our Twitter handle is @planetalkinguk. So we hope you've all had an absolutely fantastic Christmas.
Definitely.
I shall no doubt be very full of beef Wellington. And you'll be full of turkey and goodness knows what else.
Yeah, I'll be full of the Maltese sweets out of the what was it? The Heroes. The chocolates,
right, okay, yeah.
Because everyone always takes those first, so I'll be getting to those first.
Right, okay, right. That's what I like. You're a real team player, aren't you, Carl?
I love it.
Absolutely.
So for me, Carlos, then it is a very festive and jingle bells goodbye from everyone here in the studio, which is just me and Matt.
Yeah, indeed, absolutely. And from Matt, as I say, I hope you're all very drunk and that you've eaten everything you want, and of course you've got all the presents you wanted for Christmas.
Yes, socks and pants and everything.
Absolutely. From all of us here in the studio, it is a very festive goodbye.
Goodbye.